Thank you very much for joining me tonight. It's really lovely to see how many people are interested in Bach Flower Remedies. It's kind of concerning also to see how many people are really urgently asking questions about Bach Flower Remedies for fear issues, because it shows how common these are. So I hope that tonight's short talk will be useful for you. There's 38 Bach Flower Remedies plus Rescue Remedy, which makes 39. Rescue Remedy is a blend of 5 different remedies. So I'll be talking about the specific remedies for fear this evening. So there'll be 6 remedies. I'm going to turn off my webcam now I've said hello to you, and carry on and talk. There we go. So to introduce myself, for those of you who don't already know me, my name's Lisa Tenzin-Dolma, and I'm the principal of the International School for Canine Psychology and Behaviour. I'm also the co-chair of the Association of Interdogs, and I represent Interdogs with the Animal Behaviour and Training Council, the ABTC, alongside Carolyn Menteith. And I'm also the founder of the Dog Welfare Alliance, so I'm very passionate about all things to do with dogs. So to start the talk, what are Bach Flower Remedies? They're a very gentle, natural way in which we can heal mental and emotional disturbances. They were developed by Dr. Edward Bach, a physician who was born in 1886, who became a renowned physician, but then went on to make the mind-body connection in the 1920s and dedicated the remainder of his life, which was only 6 years, unfortunately, to Bach Flower Remedies from 1930. He understood that emotional dis-ease and disturbances, if that was left untreated, can lead to physical illness. So as I just said, there were 38 remedies plus Rescue Remedy, which combines 5 other remedies, and all but 1 of the remedies derive from flowers, with the exception of rock water. Now the remedies come into emotional groupings, so you have specific remedies for fear, for uncertainty, for loneliness, for insufficient interest in present circumstances, for oversensitivity to influences and ideas, despondency or despair, and overcaring for the welfare of others. So there's a series of remedies within each group, and the ones that we're going to be looking at today are the remedies that are specific for fear. So how do Bach Flower Remedies work? Well, our mental states affect our emotional states, which in turn affects our physical health. I'm sure some of you will have experienced, if you've been through a period of intense emotional turmoil or discomfort, or you've been worrying a lot about something, that you feel very tired, and eventually you start to feel unwell, and it can cause all sorts of physical ailments. So the idea behind the Bach Flower Remedies is that you match the remedy that goes with mental or emotional state, and that remedy helps to heal that state through enhancing the positive qualities of the mind and emotions that are the opposite to the negative qualities that you're experiencing in that moment, and which, of course, as this is mostly about dogs, that our dogs are experiencing. With fear states, the remedies enhance the qualities of courage, of security, safety, strength, and love that at that moment aren't being experienced. There are no contraindications and side effects to Bach Flower Remedies. They can be used safely alongside all different therapies. They can be used alongside medication as well, although I always ask that the vet is consulted if a dog is on medication, so that the vet is aware that the dog is having the remedies as well. A lot of vets now have heard of the remedies. Some of them actually use them, and I found that most of them are very open to the idea of something that may relieve the dog's distress. They're very easy to administer. You can put 2 drops from each remedy that you choose into your dog's food and water twice a day, or you can stroke a couple of drops onto the fur, on the dome of the head, or on the flanks or the paws. You just put a couple of drops of the remedy into your hand and then stroke it in. You can also let your dog lick it off. Some dogs really like the taste, other dogs don't. And I found that one of my dogs loved them when he was very unwell. Charlie, my feral dog, who's no longer with us, he would actually lick the remedies from my hand. Sky, my lurcher, doesn't like the taste of them at all, but is very open to having them in his food and his water, and is quite happy to have them stroked in. So you can be guided by your dog. Also, although I'm giving a kind of baseline for dosages here, you can give the remedy as many times as it's needed during the day, although I'll be talking about administering them twice a day in food and water, or putting them into the fur on the head or the side, the flanks or the paws. If your dog is very distressed, or if you're entering a situation where you feel that your dog may get distressed or is going to find things stressful, like a visit to the vet, or with a dog who is very uncomfortable about the outdoors at the moment, then you can give the remedies or stroke the remedies in beforehand. And it can be very useful if you have dogs who are very reactive when they're out on walks, for instance, or very anxious. Then you can take the bottle with you and use it as needed while you're out if you see any signs of stress. So they're very portable and they're very useful. If you're mixing several remedies at a time, then what you can do is use a 30 ml dropper bottle, which is what you can see in the picture behind the text here. Fill that with still spring water and add 2 or 3 drops of each of the remedies you're going to use to this, and shake it well. Once you put the top on, obviously, keep it in the fridge and add 2 to 3 drops of that mixture to the food and water twice daily. You can also take it out with you so that you can use it for your dog. You can put it directly on your dog's coat while you're out if you need to. Big note here, never ever give the remedies straight from the glass dropper directly into the dog's mouth. It's dangerous, because if the dog closes his jaws, then the glass dropper could break. So you need to be very, very careful in that respect. So why combine Bach Flower Remedies and behaviour therapy? I think there's quite a few behaviourists here tonight. And Bach Flower Remedies are a really good adjunct to behaviour therapy. They can help speed up the healing process. They can help dogs to relax while you're doing behaviour work with them to enable them to cope in specific situations. Dogs can't rationalise a fear. They can't explain how they're feeling and why they're feeling that. They just know that they're feeling fear. And I'm sure you'll have experienced yourself that if there's something you're very afraid of, it's very difficult to be rational in that moment. I'll be going through a little tiny bit of science in a few minutes to explain why this is, but fear is not something that can ever be rationalised, and it can be extreme and very debilitating. So behaviour therapy helps us to figure out what the causes of that fear are. So we use observation. We take note of the dog's body language, of how the dog is responding in particular situations. We look at what their safe zone is, how far away they need to be from a specific influence or trigger to not be afraid and not feel the need to react to that. So the Bach Flower Remedies can help to ease that process in a very gentle way and can speed up the healing process. I found that it varies a lot from animal to animal. I've used Bach Flower Remedies with all sorts of animals, with dogs, horses, cats, hamsters, a wide variety of animals as well as humans. And I found that it depends really on whether you hit on exactly the right remedy for that specific issue, how quickly it works, and also how chronic a condition is. I think definitely my fastest response was from a cat. A few years ago, a friend of mine had a cat. She'd brought in a kitten thinking that her cat would really enjoy having someone to play with. And her cat, who already was quite a shy soul anyway, was petrified of the kitten, absolutely hated the kitten, couldn't cope at all, and spent the first week hiding under the bed, refused to eat, refused to drink, and they were absolutely desperate for how to help this cat, and having to debate returning the kitten, and were very, very upset about it. So I went over there with my little box of Bach Remedies and had a look at her, could see her hiding under the bed. She was extremely scared. And I mixed up a batch for her and left them there. And it took me about 10 minutes to walk home from her house. Just as I came in the door, my phone rang, and it was my friend to say that she'd put a few drops in her hand and smoothed them into the top of her cat's head. And the cat had actually then licked them off the palm of her hand, and moments later had gone downstairs and started playing with the kitten. So it was a complete turnaround, and that dramatic effect isn't all that usual, I don't think. I've not seen it happen that quickly with any other animals, but I have found with dogs that a lot of them do respond very quickly. I can remember one greyhound I worked with in particular who was trying to get the remedies out of my hand as I was actually putting them in the bottle, was really desperate to have them. So in a sense, there may be an affiliation with a system such as zoopharmacognosy, where animals choose what is going to be good for them. They know instinctively what's going to help. So emotions, very powerful things, and I'm going to be talking about those a little bit because it's very important to understand a little about emotions in order to work effectively with the remedies. The effectiveness of the remedies depends very much on you choosing the right ones for your dog. So if you haven't chosen the right one, there'll just be no effect whatsoever. You won't notice any difference. If you've chosen the right remedy or mix of remedies, then you'll notice a difference in them. So through deciphering the negative emotion and working to change this to a positive one, we can create lasting change. So we can do this through that combination of Bach Flower Remedies and behaviour therapy. So what are emotions? They're specific reactions to events that arise before we're conscious of experiencing them. So they're subconscious responses. They comprise subjective feelings, physiological responses, and expressive behaviours. In other words, you have the emotion, you have the feeling, your body responds, so your heart rate goes up, your pupils may dilate, your blood pressure may rise if you're afraid, and then you have the expressive behaviours, which is where you either jump back or, if you're a reactive dog, you leap forward. So emotions occur in the subcortical regions of the brain, in the amygdala and the ventromedial prefrontal cortices, and they set off biochemical reactions that alter your physical state, and they control hormones. So with fear, that stimulates adrenaline, cortisol, and norepinephrine specifically, and they can be measured. So you can measure emotions through brain activity, through scans, especially functional MRI scans, and there's been a lot of very interesting research done with dogs in MRI scanners, functional MRI scanners, where they've been able to see exactly which areas of the brain light up when specific emotions are being felt, and they found that these are the same in dogs as they are in humans. So dogs are very much emotional creatures, just as we are. So you measure brain activity, blood flow, heart rate, and pupil dilation. And they can be seen and interpreted. You can see what an animal or a person is feeling through their facial expressions, through micro expressions, which are very fleeting expressions that last possibly a fraction of a second. Quite often they only last a 30th of a second, which is an incredibly short space of time. And this is something I've studied in depth. It's really fascinating because you can see it in animals as well as in dogs. And of course, body language, which is something that very often we notice very easily, much more quickly than we'll notice a fleeting facial expression. So these are the areas of the brain that are affected by it. So it's specifically, if I can get my mouse there, around here, particularly around the amygdala the hippocampus. This is the areas of the brain that are affected when you're afraid. I'll also be talking about feelings in a moment, and they're actually experienced in a different, they're registered in a different area of the brain. They're registered around here. So this is the core of where you experience your emotions, where they hit, basically. And there is actually a difference between emotions and feelings. We tend to think that they're the same thing. You say, I feel loving, or I feel caring, or I feel afraid. But they're very different. Feelings originate in that area I just showed you, the neocortical region of the brain, and they're mental associations and reactions to emotions. So where emotions are something that are felt physically, that have an incredible impact on our bodies, feelings are mental associations and reactions. And they're subjective. They're influenced by our personal beliefs, by our experiences, and by our memories. So a feeling is a mental portrayal or projection of what's happening in your body when you experience an emotion. So if you think of this in terms of your dog feeling afraid, seeing something, seeing another dog, if they're afraid of other dogs, seeing another dog, they experience the emotion, they experience this massive surge of chemicals that originate in the brain. They experience the rapid heartbeat, the dilated pupils, piloerection, the fur will stand on end. It will have all of these different influences on the body. And the feeling that then comes after that is the mental portrayal and projection. So the dog thinks, I feel really uncomfortable, I'm really unhappy, I need to respond in some way to cope with this feeling. So feelings are mental byproducts that arise from your brain, perceiving, recognizing, and giving feeling to an emotion, giving meaning, sorry, to an emotion. So you have the emotion first, then the feeling. And feelings involve cognitive input, involves thought. And they can't be precisely measured. So you can't measure somebody's feelings or a dog's feelings by the rate of their heartbeat or their blood pressure measurement. You also have primary and secondary emotions. And these are quite important to just understand a little when you're working with your dog and when you're trying to figure out exactly how your dog is feeling in that moment, what emotion your dog is experiencing, so that you can work with your dog to overcome that, to cope with that, and you can decide on which remedies are the most appropriate ones to use. Primary emotions are the immediate response to a situation or event. So they're the direct result of our perception of event. They're what happens instantly when we experience something. They give us information about our perception of the moment, and they compel us to act. So if we're faced with a threat, with something frightening, the primary emotion will be fear. If something good is happening, the primary emotion will be happiness. But these are very swiftly followed by the secondary emotion, and that shows how you're mentally processing the experience and the emotion. So your dog may be experiencing fear. That could be followed by anger, or it could be followed by anxiety. And your dog's response to that secondary emotion will show you what it is that it is. So if a dog is afraid and then is feeling anger, you will see the dog respond in an angry way. You'll see the dog lunge forward. You'll see piloerection. The hackles will go up. The eyes will get bigger. You'll be able to see the whites of the eyes. The teeth may come out. All of the body language that you would associate with anger, you would see. And you may only get a fleeting glimpse, excuse me, a fleeting glimpse of the primary emotion, which is fear. So what you may be registering, because it can happen very quickly, this switch over, is you'll see the anger without seeing the fear. Shame, depression, relief, and dismay are secondary emotions. And it's very easy, as I just said, to confuse a secondary emotion for a primary emotion, because if what you're seeing most of the time is the secondary emotion, then it may seem as if the primary emotion is being hidden. It's just that it's been very fleeting. So fear may lead to ongoing anxiety states. secondary emotions linger for much longer, which is why it's much easier to see them in your dog. And the chemistry of fear, which is just useful to know about, because this explains why it is that the rational brain has no control over our responses to it, and your poor dog has no control when he or she is afraid. There's the trigger initially, there's the situation that creates the fear, the fear response. The amygdala then sends out an alarm response, the amygdala in the brain, which then sends signals to the hypothalamus, and you get a release of corticotropic releasing hormone, HCG, which prompts the release of cortisol, and the fight-flight reflex, the increased heart rate, the blood pressure and respiration, dilated pupils, all of the things that you would associate with a fight, flight, freeze response. The connections from the amygdala to the cingulate cortex tighten specific muscles, so it affects the voice pitch. If you're afraid, your voice will actually sound higher, and you'll be able to feel a tightness around your throat. So your voice will sound higher. With a dog, the bark is higher, the hackles may rise, piloerection. This chemical response stimulates the dog to growl. And then the locus coeruleus in the brainstem produces and dispenses norepinephrine. So that creates a state of hyper-alertness. The dog is immediately on guard. So with this, there's no control over these responses. And it's something, if you have a situation where you feel afraid, then you'll be able to feel all of this happening in yourself. And expressions of fear. This one on the left, it's Tim Ross, when he was starring in a very interesting TV series called Lie to Me, which is all about micro expressions. And I studied with Paul Ekman, who is the person who discovered micro expressions, or co-discovered micro expressions back in the 1950s, and has been working with it ever since. It's very interesting because you can see this in humans and in dogs. So with fear, I thought this diagram would show you beautifully how it works. I'm sure that you'll recognize the expression of fear when you see it, but you can analyze it too. So the eyebrows are raised and they're pulled together. The upper eyelids are raised, which means that you see more of the whites of the eyes. The lower eyelids are tensed, so you can see this tightness underneath the eyes. The lips are slightly stretched horizontally back towards the ears. They may be open or closed. Now, we can see this in dogs as well. A lot of dogs' expressions are very similar to our own expressions, and this is something I've given separate talks about, because it's fascinating when you make the comparisons between the human and canine expressions. On the right here, this is Charlie, my feral dog, when he was being captured. He was Romanian one-eyed feral dog. He was captured after about 19 months of being tracked, and when he'd lost an eye, and he was taken in to have his eye removed, and then eventually sent to me for rehabilitation, and I ended up adopting him, and he was with me for just over 2 years before he died very suddenly. You can see he's actually gone into a freeze response. He's flattened himself to the ground. He's not actually making any attempt to attack, which very often in this situation, I know from people who have captured dogs such as Charlie and street dogs, is quite the opposite to what you would normally get. Normally they'd be using their weaponry, they'd be using their teeth. With Charlie, he was flattened. You can see how his ears have gone right back. You can see the raised eyebrows, as you can in the photo of Tim Ross. The eye, you can only see one of his eyes, but it's very wide and staring directly. And all of the tension in his face is pulling back the skin in his face back towards his ears and the back of his skull. With this little one here, you can clearly see the sclera, the whites of the eyes showing. The dog eyebrows are raised again, and he's looking very, very anxious. You can see a great deal of tension in that face. The ears are being pulled back, the skin on the side of the face and from the mouth is all being pulled back. So you can see how similar those are, and it can be very interesting to have a look at lots of different expressions, pictures of expressions. Look at people who you know as well, look at dogs that you know, and get a good idea of what they're feeling from that expression. See what's actually happening in the face, which muscles are being tensed, which muscles are relaxed. If a dog's happy, then they'll have an open mouth, lolling tongue. You'll get that wonderful doggy smile. The muscles will be relaxed, the face will be relaxed, the eyes will be soft. So it's very different to the expression of fear. The causes of fear, there can be numerous different causes. It can be genetic. It could be a lack of environmental enrichment during puppyhood, which happens sadly with puppy farm dogs, with pups who've been brought into an environment where really there's no stimulation, there's no experiences going on around them. With dogs who've simply been born into an environment, not necessarily a puppy farm, but where there hasn't been much going on and they've just been shut away. It can cause enormous fear issues later in life because they've not had the opportunity to experience anything in order to be able to cope, so they don't develop those coping mechanisms at the crucial time. Genetic causes can be a number of different reasons, but very often if the parents are fearful or the mother's fearful during pregnancy particularly, then that can be transferred to the puppies before they're even born. But there is also evidence that a fearful father passes that on genetically to the puppies. Lack of adequate socialization, especially during those crucial early couple of months, 3 months, where it's really important that pups get to meet and greet lots of different people, animals, other dogs, be able to find that the world actually is an exciting place rather than a scary place. And if they don't have that socialization, everything is frightening to them. They don't understand it, they don't know how to cope. And sadly, if that doesn't happen within the early weeks, then very often that's fixed for life. It's very difficult to get past it because that window is then closed in their development. Trauma and negative experiences, so this could be an attack from another dog, or somebody treating them badly, being abused in any way, being involved in an accident. There's a number of causes of trauma and negative experiences. And then idiopathic, which means the cause is unknown, is very, very difficult to figure it out. The dog just seems to be fearful generally. Physical or mental health issues, very often with certain illnesses and diseases, then that can cause fear issues or cause reactivity. And one of the first things I do when I see a fearful dog is find out when they last had really thorough health check. And if they haven't had blood tests and a good health check recently, then I would ask those to be done, because it could possibly be something physical that is underlying everything else, and the dog is just responding because of that. And if you treat the physical cause, then that makes it much easier to work with the fear issue. Toxicity, so this can be toxins within the environment. I've known dogs who've actually reacted very badly even to carpet cleaner, different chemicals that are used in the home. So it could be any number of toxins, or it could be something that they ingest. All sorts of reasons behind that, and also psychological due to age and the aging process. So particularly with older dogs, if they get canine dementia, CCD, canine cognitive dysfunction as we call it, then that can make them more fearful. There's changes going on in the brain and they can't help that. They just find things harder to cope with, their behaviour can change. There can be all sorts of very bizarre issues if a dog has canine cognitive dysfunction. And the difference between anxiety, fear, phobia and anger. Anxiety is the anticipation of future danger from unknown or imagined origins. Fear is the body's instinctive response to an external perceived threat. So that something is happening that is sparking off the fear response. A phobia is a seemingly irrational, persistent, extreme fear that results in panic and active avoidance. And I'll be showing a photograph of a dog I worked with who had extreme phobias, and it's just such a sad thing to see. Anger is an intense emotional response to frustration or threat that is responded to with aggression. And of course, anger can be a secondary emotion that arises from fear. So you have to be very careful to look at what that cause is, and where that emotion has come from. Is it a primary emotion? Is it a secondary emotion? So now we're on to the remedies, and there are 6 remedies for fear issues if you include rescue remedy, which is a good remedy to use with anything really, and it's one that I often add to mixes for different dogs, depending on what the issue is. So there's Aspen, cherry plum, Mimulus, red chestnut and rock rose are all specific remedies for fear issues, and then rescue remedy can be used alongside those, but it can be used with other remedies as well, or just on its own. It's very useful to have a little bottle of rescue remedy in your pocket if you have a very anxious or fearful dog. By the way, these paintings were done by my daughter for a really lovely book about Bach Flower Remedies, which I'll give you the title of at the end. It was written by my friend Kat Young in America, who's written lots and lots of books, and Lisa Tenzin-Dolma, my daughter, did the illustrations for this book. It looks beautiful in full colour. So this is Aspen. So it's used for fear and anxiety, obsessive behaviour, hypersensitivity, trembling or shaking. So you would give this to a dog with generalised, non-specific fears or phobias. A dog who's very hypersensitive to the environment, who's easily upset, startled and frightened. Trembling or shaking is a very big indicator for this remedy. It's the first one I think of if I see a dog who trembles a lot, because if you look at the aspen plant, it actually trembles. So it gives you a good kind of picture, and I'll be showing you towards the end of this talk, I'll show you the write-up about Aspen in the course book for the ISCP Emotional Healing for Dogs course, because it shows how you need to look at all of these different aspects in order to decipher which remedy is ideal for your dog, really matches your dog. So the therapy for Aspen is be compassionate. This is a dog who is very scared to the point of trembling, who may not even know what that fear is, just generally feels fearful. Aspen very often is used for non-specific fears. A dog who may be phobic about certain things that don't make any sense to you. If a dog has slipped on a floor and become very uncomfortable, even if they haven't been injured as a result, then they may become phobic about that floor, about going on that floor again in the future. But that is a phobia that you can understand because you've seen what's happened. You know that there is a reason behind it. But very often with Aspen dogs, as I call them, you will find that there's no specific reason for any of these fears and phobias. It's very difficult to pin down. So be compassionate, look for ways to increase that dog's security, keep them comfortable, don't overwhelm them, make sure that any new experience introduced very slowly and cautiously so that you can gradually build the dog's confidence. If you find that the dog is looking anxious, if you see any signs of fearful body language or facial expressions at all, then step back, because that means that you're moving too fast and you are going to make things worse. So this is a kind of basic profile for Aspen. And then Cherry Plum. This is for extreme tension, extreme inner tension that's kind of held inside and then bursts out like a volcano, sudden outbursts, unpredictable behaviour. If you have a dog who's very reactive, who will be fine 1 minute and then just explodes the next moment, then cherry plum would be the remedy that you would be looking for. Post-traumatic stress disorder is very good for as well. And as I just said, dogs who seem to be coping and then suddenly explode. But also bear in mind that you need to be thinking about, is this dog trigger stacking? Has there been a series of events that seem very small that the dog's been coping with, and then one more thing has happened that the dog can't cope with and suddenly explodes? Is that the cause, or is it that the dog periodically goes through the cherry plum state? If it's something that happens often, then you would use cherry plum. If it only happens occasionally, then look at the other remedies as well, because it may be trigger stacking and another remedy may be more suitable for your dog, depending on the picture that goes with that remedy. So find ways of reducing stress and teach alternative coping strategies, because this dog is not able to cope in a lot of situations very often. So find ways to alleviate the stress that that dog is feeling under, so that there isn't this build-up of stress that leads to an explosion. Teach the dog to cope in different situations, take things very slowly. With all fear issues, take things slowly. And teach the dog alternative behaviours as well, so that he or she has other ways of dealing with a situation that he's finding hard. Mimulus. Now, Mimulus is fear of known things. It's for what known fears. So if we know what the dog is afraid of, if it's other dogs or fireworks or being alone, if the dog has separation anxiety, or if it's people wearing hats, you know, anything you can think of, if your dog is specifically afraid of something, then Mimulus is the remedy of choice. It's very, very useful for known fears. It can be used for nervousness and hypersensitivity as well. It's for dogs who react to particular triggers, to specific triggers, so that you can pinpoint it and say, my dog is afraid of this. With therapy, gain trust, which is the way to work with all dogs. Help your dog feel safe and secure. Avoid the triggers if you possibly can while you work on increasing the confidence. And then once your dog is feeling more confident, is coping better, and has been on the Mimulus for a while, then gradually start to work on gently desensitizing him or her to whatever it is that he or she's afraid of. But do this very gradually. You don't want to flood the dog, which is something I'll be mentioning again in a minute. Red chestnut is for generalized anxiety and worry for others and overcaring, hypervigilant dogs. This is for the dog who follows you everywhere, who lies in doorways, who lies near all entrance and exit points, who tends to take the position in the room where they can see absolutely everything and everyone, so that they can monitor the situation. It's a dog who basically is feeling responsible for those around him, which of course isn't something that we want our dogs to do, because we're responsible for them. So very often separation anxiety, that can be another indicator of red chestnut. If this is a dog who follows you around all the time, who's hypervigilant, who seems to be anxious, you know, who will go over and split up other dogs if they're playing, even if that play isn't escalating. It's a dog who is very worried generally, and very fearful of not being in control and not being able to look after those around him. He feels this sense of responsibility. So what you need to do in that case is set the boundaries so that he can relax. Just teach him that it's okay, you're the one who's responsible, you're taking charge. He doesn't need to worry about it. He doesn't have to feel that he's got to take care of everybody and make sure that no one's coming to any harm. This is a different remedy. There's other remedies for separation anxiety. So Heather, with the Heather dog, that dog would be following people around, but wouldn't be feeling this urge to take responsibility. So that is where you kind of look for the difference between the pictures of the remedies. praise and reward all calm behaviour, and if there is separation anxiety present, work on that. Teach the dog to be alone for very short spaces of time, walk in one door, walk back through another door, go through a leaving routine that you normally go through, but then don't leave, open and close the door, come back in and get settled down and pick up a book or something, or make a cup of tea, so that the dog stops seeing all of these things as triggers to you leaving and doesn't have that opportunity to keep building up all of this anxiety. Rock rose. It's for panic states. It's one of the ingredients in Rescue Remedy. It's for dogs who are in a very extreme state, panic states, nightmares, terror. One of the dogs I worked with had been tied up and abandoned, and in trying to break free, he'd been tied by one of his back legs, and in trying to break away, he'd injured himself terribly. And when he was rescued and sent into foster, and his fosterers did adopt him eventually, he had terrible panic states. He had nightmares where he would be clearly having a really bad dream. He'd be crying and whimpering, yelping, moving a lot in his sleep, but he would suddenly leap from that nightmare and attack anybody or any other dog who happened to be in the vicinity. The equivalent to the human night terrors, where, you know, he appeared to be awake, but he wasn't. He didn't know what he was doing. So it's for extreme terror and dogs who suffered trauma. And this dog actually responded wonderfully to Rock Rose. He stopped the nightmares and the night terrors, and he settled in and became a mentor dog to other foster dogs eventually who went into that home. So it shows you how powerful that combination can be of the remedies and behaviour therapy. So for dogs who suffer trauma or can't cope, who have extreme fear issues, you'd use Rock Rose. And the therapy aspect of it would be very much keep the dog feeling safe, be understanding, consider how much that dog has gone through. Sympathy isn't very good quality to have when a dog has been through trauma, because that dog isn't thinking about that situation. He's living in the moment, but unfortunately some of those moments are horrific when he's traumatized. So what you need to do is be calm, be caring, be compassionate. You can be empathic without giving lots and lots of attention when the dog's really stressed, because that will just make things worse. It just makes the dog feel more stressed. So gentle reassurance, gentle strokes if the dog wants to be touched, but be guided by the dog. And work on you feeling calm, because that is really important. Our dogs are our mirrors emotionally, and if we're in a very stressed state and if we're very worried about a dog, then our dog is going to pick up on that and express that some way as well. It's going to make their stress level far worse. And work on building feelings of security. And Rescue Remedy. Good old Rescue Remedy that I think most people know about this, even if they haven't used any of the other remedies. Cherry plum, clematis, impatiens, rock rose and Star of Bethlehem are the ingredients, and it's used for a number of things: shock, trauma, injury, emotional turmoil if you're feeling upset, accidents, and any form of change. So it's a very useful remedy to have, and you can add that to other remedies, or you can use it on its own. Another remedy for change, incidentally, which I haven't gone into in this talk because it's not necessarily to do with fear, but it can be useful alongside fear remedies, is walnut. This is a remedy that I always give to new dogs coming into a home, and to the other dogs in the home as well, to dogs going into kennels when they're going to rescue or into foster care or into a new adoptive home. If there's any kind of change in the environment, walnut helps a dog to cope. So it's worth considering using that alongside other remedies if you're putting a new behaviour regime in place and therapy regime in place, because that can help to speed it up as well. So assessing and matching fear responses and remedies, look for the causes, be observant. it's so important that we're observant with our dogs, especially if they have any kind of issues, because then we can see when their body language changes, when their facial expressions change. We can see their response to individual triggers, to environmental influences. And when we see those responses, then we can act on them. We can assess how to work with that. So if a dog is trembling, anxious, showing discomfort signals like lip licking and yawning or stepping back, then you'd use Aspen. For extreme tension, the whites of the eyes visible, reactive behaviour and explosions, that would be cherry plum. For a heightened flight reflex, lower tail and body, putting the weight on the rear end. So in other words, the dog is actually leaning backwards, even if it may look as if the shoulders are moving forwards, but if you look at the rear end, you'll see that that's pushed back. That would be a Mimulus indicator. If a dog's watchful, tense, constantly following you around, lying in entrances and exits, making sure that he can see you at all times, then you would choose red chestnut. And if the dog's freezing, bolting, shutting down, quaking, cringing, having nightmares, showing signs of terror, rock rose would be the remedy you choose, and rescue remedy for all forms of fear and trauma. So here's just some quick pictures of body language that you would see very clearly for different remedies in dogs. Obviously, you'll see this in all different situations, depending on what's going on in the environment as well. But with the Aspen dog, you can see really anxious, all the facial muscles pulled back. That dog looks as if he's trembling. You can see the sclera, the whites of the eyes. It's a dog who is in a very tense, frightened state. Cherry plum, the reactivity, the outbursts, PTSD, you would expect a dog to probably show their teeth, but certainly to bark a lot, to lunge forward. Mimulus, very often a dog who is in need of Mimulus will try to hide. So like with this dog, looking sideways, showing the sclera, trying to hide away, tucking, making himself as small as possible. And red chestnut, that classic worried look, the kind of anxious, worried look of a dog who is really hypervigilant and is feeling the need to take responsibility that he can't really cope with at all. Rock rose, this is a dog who I worked with. I mentioned earlier a dog who had extreme phobias, and this poor dog, it turned out he had a brain tumour actually, but we worked with him for quite some time. He was afraid of going outside if there were clouds in the sky, if there was an aeroplane in the sky. He freaked out if a light was turned on in the house. So there were all sorts of very extreme behaviours, and you can see how he's pressing his head there. And when I was sent that photograph of him after I'd been working with him for a while, I'd already said take him to the vet, but when I saw that photo I said please get a brain scan done, ask the vet to do a brain scan, because very often dogs will head press for different health issues, and because of the combination of his very bizarre behaviours and phobias and this head pressing, the first thing that sprung to my mind was brain damage, a brain issue. So emotional empathy and emotional contagion, the photo in the back of the text was Charlie, who you saw during his capture, absolutely terrified, flattening to the ground, completely shut down. This was him about a year and a half later, racing around the garden, grinning at me and my daughter, and Sky's there, my lurcher, grinning as well. Happiness begets happiness, and stress and tension begets stress and tension. So our responses are very important to our dogs. The way that we're feeling, the body language we're using, the facial expressions that we're exhibiting, our micro expressions, which are just very fleeting, all of those are noticed by our dogs. Dogs are incredibly observant. They're amazing anthropologists. Unconscious habits that we have, things that we do that we're not even aware of, can affect our dogs. Our dogs pick up on these and they make an association. So if we're happy and we're expressing happiness, if we're laughing or joking around, then our dogs will pick up on that. If we're very stressed and upset or angry, then our dogs will pick up on that. So you have this ongoing emotional empathy, emotional contagion going on between us and our dogs. So does the carer need emotional support as well? Is the person really stressful? Are you very stressed if your dog is very fearful? If so, maybe consider taking some Bach Flower Remedies yourself, or finding ways of gaining emotional support from avenues around you, because if you get the help, then very often your dog will be able to cope better, because you'll be coping better, and you'll be more able to follow through and be consistent with the behaviour therapy that you're working on with your dog. Yesterday we had a practical study day at our ISCP centre in Devon, which was just wonderful. It was really good fun, and one of the things that happened there, we were discussing play. That was the main focus of the day, and in the afternoon all of these dogs were brought into the barn, and it was really interesting that as soon as their carer started goofing around and running about and being playful, these dogs immediately got into the spirit of play and joined in and just had the most wonderful time. So this is something that's very important to remember. Now, working with fear issues, the starting point is to gain the dog's trust. That's the starting point for our relationships with dogs, full stop. Trust brings about a sense of confidence. A dog feels safe, it's able to feel that we can take care of them, and is then able to feel more in control of being able to take care of themselves, to cope in situations that they previously weren't comfortable in. Initially, avoid or remove all possible sources of fear. I know that isn't always possible with some things, but if you possibly can, try to remove the sources of fear, and then just gradually introduce them as you work with the dog at a pace that the dog can cope with. Be calm, be a protector, be your dog's champion. Watch the body language, be observant. Watch responses in particular situations and environments so that you can monitor your dog's emotional states, and gradually broaden your dog's horizons at a pace that's comfortable for him. Use desensitisation and counterconditioning, which I shall just mention briefly in a moment. Be patient and consistent, and use environmental enrichment. This is wonderful for helping fearful dogs feel more comfortable and more confident. Sprinkles TM, if you look this up, it's absolutely wonderful. You will find an article about it. It's written by Sally Hopkins, who developed this, devised this, on the Dog Games website, and it's absolutely wonderful. It involves just spreading very tiny amounts of wet food rather than dried food around the environment without the dog seeing you do it, and then letting the dog just go and find them. And it creates a state of deep relaxation in dogs. It helps them to relax, to cope in all different situations, because they're engaging their brain on something that feels positive to them. Other aids could be Bach, as well as Bach Flower Remedies. Pet Remedy is very good. Zilkine helps some dogs, not all. Tellington Tea Touch, zoopharmacognosy, homeopathy and Bowen therapy. There's other remedies as well, other aids and complementary therapies. So it's worth kind of having a look at what else is available if you want to explore further. But hopefully you'll find that Bach Flower Remedies alongside behaviour therapy will make a significant difference for your dog. Desensitisation and counterconditioning. Desensitisation is gradual exposure to the source or the cause of the fear that starts at a minimal intensity so that your dog isn't reacting, and you pair that with something good. Be aware that if a dog is very afraid, they're not likely to take food. So if you brought your dog too close to that source of fear, your dog isn't going to want a treat. You're not going to be able to create positive reinforcement for your dog. Basically, you need to make sure that your dog feels safe at that time. So keep the level very, very low if there's any exposure, and then gradually increase the level or the distance, decrease rather, in line with the dog's ability to tolerate the stressor. Check what your dog's safe zone is. Is your dog comfortable with whatever the stressor is at a distance of 30 feet or 90 feet or 200 feet. Once you know your dog's safe zone, then that makes it much easier to work with your dog at coping with different situations, because you don't want anything to impinge on your dog's safe zone until your dog is showing that that safe zone has actually become smaller around them. Remove the dog at the slightest sign of discomfort, because you don't want your dog to become stressed. And this will, over a period of time, if you do it very gradually and do it properly, then dogs can learn to cope with stressors. Now, counterconditioning involves teaching your dog to replace an unacceptable behaviour with an acceptable behaviour. So focusing on you instead of lunging at another dog, and then you pair that with a positive consequence. So it could be a treat, lots of praise, a game, whatever it is that floats your dog's boat and makes him or her feel really good. And the soft and slow approach works best. Try not to rush things, because rushing things tends to lead to steps back rather than steps forward. And flooding. Imagine you're frightened of spiders and somebody puts you in a tank full of spiders like this one in the picture, great big hairy ones. Then you would be really panicky. And flooding is just that. It's exposing your dog to a situation that he finds really stressful, really frightening, where he's got no way of getting away, no escape. And it causes all sorts of problems. It can cause long-term fears, trauma, learned helplessness. Dogs can completely shut down. So it should never be used, this method. It's actually very cruel. Now, when you combine Bach Flower Remedies with behaviour therapy, first of all, you'll be observing and assessing your dog. Then you'll choose a remedy or the remedies that match your dog's picture, emotional and mental picture. You might find that you'll need a remedy from another remedy group, because your dog may not just be fearful, there may be depression present, in which case you would be looking at other remedies from different groups. There might be loss of interest, there might be extreme anger that isn't just to do with fear. So it's worth having a look, exploring the different remedies and see whether there's others that your dog needs too. Give the remedy twice a day, 2 drops or 2 to 3 drops in food and water, and stroke it into the fur if you're expecting an increase in stress, and then decide what behaviour therapy is appropriate for your dog and that you can be consistent with, because that's very, very important. And be aware that there's no kind of magic potion, although I have heard people call it a magic potion in the past when it has worked very well. Some dogs respond within a few days, others might take much longer, might take weeks or even a couple of months. You can give the remedies for as long as you like. So if you want to find out more, if you want to actually study it, then I teach a course in emotional healing for dogs, which has 6 sections for each of the remedies, and I'll give you an example of the Aspen one in a minute. So the keywords help you choose the remedy by listing the mental or emotional states that the remedy can help to heal. Then the transformational effects are keywords which describe the potential transformation once healing's taken place. The name of each remedy for that dog, so say the Aspen dog section or the larch dog section, gives a personality and behavioural profile for the dog in need of that remedy. It gives you an indicator of how that dog behaves. And then the physical signs give information about body language and canine communication that's related to those mental and emotional states that are out of balance. And then the behaviour therapy section. So this is a text from Aspen, from the course. So the keywords for Aspen, which you heard about earlier on, are anxiety, apprehension, phobias, trembling, obsessiveness, and hypersensitivity. The transformational effects are confidence, bravery, and ability to cope. And the description of the Aspen dog, the high sensitivity of the dog in need of Aspen makes him prone to depression and physical illnesses if he's subjected to an atmosphere of tension or conflict. He's like an emotional sponge, soaking up the influences around him, and he tends to display anxiety and apprehension through trembling or shaking. He's fearful and easily upset, and if placed under great stress, can display phobias that may seem irrational to his carers. whereas Mimulus is the Bach Flower remedy of choice for known, clearly defined fears, such as other dogs or noises. The Aspen dog's fears are general and maybe indefinable. The indicators. Aspen's useful for dogs who are frequently apprehensive, fearful, or nervous. The remedy fits dogs who retreat rather than react aggressively when fearful. The Aspen dog tends to seek reassurance and security from his carer and needs help with building his confidence. Physical signs of anxiety, such as stepping back, lowered tail, tucked back ears, and turning away, all indicate Aspen. Stress signals such as lip licking, lying down, yawning, or avoidance are common. And behaviour therapy, the most important quality needed for helping the Aspen dog is compassion. He inhabits an inner world of constant state of fear and anxiety, and he needs kindness, understanding, and security. This provides a necessary foundation on which to help him develop confidence. Confidence building through allowing him to proceed at a pace that's comfortable for him is crucial. If you push him beyond his comfort zone too quickly, he'll retreat further and become even more anxious. Introducing him to new or previously scary experiences very gradually can help him learn to cope. Tools such as desensitizing CDs can help him adjust to sounds that have set off fear reactions. Using positive reinforcement and rewards when he's approached by strangers help him to overcome his anxiety and see his world in a new light. The keys to working with the Aspen dog are patience and consideration. The Aspen dog needs to learn that you're his guardian and protector, and that he can look to you to keep him safe in the face of perceived threats or danger. This will enable him to come out of his shell and relax. And that's the book that the illustrations are from. The Quick Guide to Bach Flower Remedies. It's a lovely little book, and if you want to look it up, it's Bach Flowers Quick Guide, or oneword.com. And there's a few books here that I've recommended. There's a webinar that you can find on YouTube on Bach Flower Remedies for Dogs, a brief introduction, which doesn't include all of the remedies, but it includes a selection of remedies from each of those groups that I described at the beginning. So that's an hour long, so you may want to watch that if you want to find out a bit more. And it gives more background information on Dr. Edward Bach as well. And there's some very good books around. The Quick Guide to Bach Flower Remedies, that wasn't written about animals, but it's just as relevant for animals as it is for people. Bach Flower Remedies for Animals by Stephen Ball and Judy Ramsell Howard. Bach Flower Remedies for Dogs by Martin J. Scott and Gail Mariani. Bach Flower Therapy Theory and Practice by Mechthilde Scheffer. I can never pronounce her name very well, but it's an absolutely brilliant book. The Heartbeat at Your Feet, A Practical, Compassionate New Way to Train Your Dog, which I wrote, which covers all aspects of behaviour therapy. Charlie, the Dog Who Came In From the Wild, was about the dog who you saw earlier on in the presentation, my feral dog from Romania, and it's the story of how I worked with him through his extreme fear issues. So it's being used a lot by people who have very fearful dogs and who have dogs who've been imported from abroad who aren't coping in a domestic environment. And Dog Training, the Essential Guide, gives just the basics of training. Inside of a Dog, What Dogs See, Smell and Know by Alexandra Horowitz is just the most wonderful book for understanding what makes your dog tick, really, how your dog experiences the world. In Defense of Dogs by John Bradshaw, fabulous book. And For Love of a Dog by Patricia McConnell, the same, and How Dogs Love Us. Now, if you want to know, there's about to be a bit of a noise because somebody is knocking on my door and my dog is going to bark. If you'll give me a second. There we go. It's gone quiet again, thank you. It's How Dogs Love Us, A Neuroscientist and His Dog Decode the Canine Brain by Gregory Burns. Now, I mentioned earlier about the functional MRI scans, the experiments that have been done with dogs that showed that essentially they're experiencing emotional states, particular emotional states, in the same areas of the brain as we do. And that book tells the story of how he taught his dog and then other dogs using positive reinforcement methods to willingly go into a functional MRI scanner, which is an incredibly confined, very noisy space, and about the results of their experiments. And there's lots of other scientists now working in this field. It's a fascinating field. So all of those are very good books. And thank you. That's the end of the presentation for now. Sorry about this little disruption slightly at the end. Colin has asked a question saying, I've really enjoyed the webinar, where can the remedies be bought? Have a look online, Colin. There's several different places you can buy them from: the Bach Centre, you can buy them from Ainsworth. I use a kit that has got all of the remedies in that I bought from Ainsworth that is very good, that a lot of my students on the emotional healing course tend to get that because it's much cheaper to buy the kit with all the remedies in than to buy individual remedies. Hannah's asking, would any Bach Flower Remedies help a dog who can display hyperactivity as a response to stress or change stimulation? Also, do the solutions contain alcohol? Yes. Have a think about which of the fear remedies, if you think that fear is the root cause, and see which of those matches closest. But also, it's from another group of remedies. Impatience is for dogs who have a very hyperactive response to things, also who can be quite irritable, very changeable. So I would say impatience would help. They contain a very small amount of alcohol as a preservative, but you can buy alcohol-free remedies. So if you do a search, the amount that is going into your dog is virtually minimal. If you think you're putting 2 drops to 3 drops in 30 mils of water, and then you're adding that 2 to 3 drops from that 30 mils to a bowl of water and a bowl of food, that's kind of homeopathic potencies, really. So it's not something that I tend to worry about, but you can buy specific non-alcohol ones that are kept in other solutions. Emma's asked, how long can dogs use Bach for? Daily, forever? Well, you can use them for as long as they're needed. So a dog can be on Bach remedies long term. And if you're feeling that it's helping your dog, then after a few weeks, you can try reducing the remedies, giving them once a day instead of twice a day. And if you find that there's a change in behavior again, that the dog isn't coping too well, then you can step the remedies up again. They're not going to do your dog any harm. Janet says she loves Bach remedies and uses them a lot. They're invaluable. When she first had her rescue dog, Maisie. Oh, that's lovely. There's lots of comments here. Thank you, everybody. It's really lovely of you. Maya says, I've used the canine rescue remedy. If using the individual remedies are the ones to use specifically for dogs, or they're used for humans as well? Both, specifically for dogs and specifically for humans. You just need to decide what the emotional and mental states are that your dog's experiencing, like you would decide what the emotional and mental state is for what a human's experiencing, and then select the remedy or the remedies that match that picture. Sparky has asked, what about the size of dogs? Would you use more than 2 to 3 drops for an 80-pound dog than a 15-pound dog? Somebody actually emailed me just before the webinar started to ask me the same question, Sparky. And no, you'd use the same amount. They don't work through dosage. They just work through the fact that the remedies have a particular effect on our subtle energies, if you like, on our emotional and mental energies. And so just as you wouldn't give a different dosage to a large dog than a small dog, if you're using homeopathy, you would use just the appropriate dosage for that particular issue. Then it's the same with remedies. You just use the same. Levi has asked if it's possible to listen again because he missed the beginning. Yes, what I'll be doing is tomorrow I will upload the webinar and create a private link on YouTube for it, which will just be available to our ISCP members and Interdogs members, and those of you who aren't members of ISCP and Interdogs but have paid to join tonight's talk. So you will all be sent the link once that's up. It will probably be tomorrow. It certainly won't be any later than tomorrow. And once the link's up, then I'll send you an email containing that link, and you'll be able to watch it as many times as you like. Then you'll be able to access it very easily. Ali says, very informative, I may need to look into changing Sorrel's remedies. If a remedy doesn't seem to be working, or if the change is very, very slow and you're using behaviour therapy as well, obviously you can't expect the remedies to do all the work, so you need to do some of the work too and use the behaviour therapy. Then it can be a good idea to try a different remedy. Have another look at the dog, see what they're exhibiting. Are they exhibiting all the things that they were when you first gave that remedy, or has there been a slight change in the picture? And if there's been a slight change in the picture, or if the remedy isn't working, then have a look and see if that picture fits any of the other remedies. Because very often you'll find that just changing a remedy can make a huge difference. Oh, thank you, Lorraine. Lorraine has completed the certificate in emotional healing, but she said she found the webinar a good refresher. They use them a lot, the remedies a lot, with the dogs coming into her rescue. So thank you. It's really great to hear that, Lorraine. And thank you, Lainey. David asks, does the course offered include issues behind fear, besides fear? Yes, it does. This webinar was specifically on fear issues because this is just a kind of tip of the iceberg with Bach Flower Remedies. And as I said at the beginning, there's several groups of emotional groups of remedies, and then there's quite a few remedies within each group. You're looking at 39 remedies, and we've covered 6 just in this hour, and I've had to talk quite fast and kind of go through it all very, very briefly with you. So I've only given the basics of the information. So the course covers all different emotional and mental states. Thank you, Emma, who says been fab, and thank you, Levi and Belinda. Liz says, I think Bach Flower Remedies are an invaluable way to help a dog alongside behaviour therapy. I highly recommend them. Is there a downloadable document offered with this webinar? I could send out the presentation. If anybody wants it, it's going to be a fairly big file. So what you could do, if you'd like to have a copy of the presentation, send me an email. You will get an email from GoToWebinar tomorrow saying, would you like to leave any feedback? By the time you get that, I'll have been able to send you the link to the webinar, to the recording of the webinar, so that you can watch it again. And if you want the presentation, then I'm happy to share it with you. David, that is fantastic. Says he wants to implement this with dogs coming into our shelter. Is that San Francisco SPCA? That's brilliant. Oh, I'm really happy to hear that. Thank you, David, because I've seen so much difference being made for dogs in rescue. And I would say, those of you who are working in rescue, your first port of call with the remedies would be rescue remedy. Before you've even done an assessment on the dog, as soon as they come in, add rescue remedy and walnuts, 2 drops of each to the food and water twice a day. The rescue remedy will help them cope with the trauma of going through into rescue from another environment, whether they've come from a home, or whether they've come from a cruelty case situation, or whether they've been abandoned. The rescue remedy will help them to cope with that trauma, and the walnuts will help them to cope with adjusting to the change. So it could be really, really useful for you. Maddie's asking what are the legal implications of giving the remedies to clients' dogs. There aren't any, really. I always tell vets, most of the dogs that I work with come through vet referral, and so I get the details, the information about the dog from the vet first of all, and then I discuss with the vet what I'm doing. If I'm giving Bach Flower Remedies, I discuss this with the vet. So it means that we can, you know, we work together basically. Bernadette says she's working with Sarah Weston and implementing the remedies. Really feels like we'll have a good handle on the dog's issues. Oh, that is wonderful, Bernadette. Really good to hear. David says, always looking for tools to pair with our behaviour modification programs that assist the patient with their emotional states. It's fantastic because you can make such a difference to the lives of dogs generally, but particularly dogs in rescue, because you want to help them as much as possible in order to home them, so that they don't bounce back, you know, so they go to the right homes and they stay there. So all praise to you. That is fantastic. Okay. Any other questions? Belinda said, absolutely, worked on a rescue foster puppy I had for 3 months. Totally shut down when she arrived. By the time she left, she was just like the puppy she should have been in the first place. Oh, that is so lovely. It's heartwarming, isn't it? It's such a good feeling to see a dog coming in. Well, it's a sad feeling when they come in sad, but it's such a good feeling to see them blossom after a while. It really makes such a difference. Fabulous. Oh, David says, see you in class. Thank you, David. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for coming. We've gone slightly over the hour. We've gone to an hour and a quarter. So thank you very much for bearing with me while I've tried to go through a huge subject in a very short space of time. And I really appreciate you all coming. It's been fantastic to have you all here. And I'm really glad those of you who've enjoyed it, who said that they've enjoyed the talk and got something out of it. I really appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you everyone for coming. Have a good evening. Take care. Bye.